Hello, I'm Dr. Faria Bukhari from Pakistan Party. I'm the chairperson. I'm talking to you live about the current situation in Syria and Ghouta. There's a lot of stories. There are a lot of stories coming out of the region, and the mainstream media, which includes most of the Israeli-sponsored and funded media, is blaming it all on Iran and Russia, calling it a genocide where children are being killed, which is true because children are being killed, but the fact is totally different from the mainstream media's narrative, which is blaming it all on one side that is fighting in this war, without taking responsibility for any kind of slandering against these forces, and without realizing that Israel has a pivotal role that it is silently, quietly playing in precipitating the current massacre in Ghouta. And as usual, as always, when Israel does bomb strikes or airstrikes in Gaza, you see the mainstream media never attacking Israel. They always attack Palestinians, or they start blaming Hamas, when the reality is that it is the Palestinian children who are perishing from the long and tedious war that Israel has orchestrated against the Palestinians. But the mainstream narrative and of the media is totally opposite of what the reality is on the ground. Same kind of scenario today, that we are seeing all these pictures, horrendous pictures, horrifying pictures, heart melting pictures that will push you into tears and make you cry. That how can anyone allow this kind of atrocity being committed against children? But the reality is different. The reality is this, that Israel wants to own land of Syria. And it is a war for land, it is a war for resources. It is not a religion orchestrated war. It is a complete war for more and more territory of Syria. Israel has already occupied the Golan Heights, we all know that. And Israel is trying to advance its disputed control of Syria. It has companies, oil drilling companies, that are owned by the same war criminals who funded and armed both sides of the war in World War II. I'm talking about the Rothschilds, and I'm also talking about the Iraq War. In the Iraq War, U.S. invaded Iraq on the basis of false information, fake news, and fake intel that they were weapons of mass destruction. When they invaded the land and when they created a havoc, they did not find any weapons of mass destruction. Unfortunately, by the end of it all, they'd already committed heinous war crimes, killing 100,000 civilians as collateral damage, and the carnage continued to build up. And the problem that I'm talking about, it's a very sensitive point. I want you to all absorb clearly. The problem that I'm talking about is the lack of neutrality of the United Nations that happened during the Iraq War, and that is happening even right now. Yesterday, I was listening to the live United Nations Security Council session, and I'm sure all of you must have done that too. And unfortunately, we did not see any kind of effort from the United Nations to try to condemn Israel for funding terrorism in Ghouta right now. There are some terrorist factions. There are some banned outfits that are currently being supplied arms to by Israel, and nobody's talking about it. I see a little bit of talk here and there. Like I saw this article yesterday from Global Research, and then there's a documentary that I shared with all of you. But other than that, nobody is trying to highlight the role of Israel in precipitating this mass massacre and this mass genocide against Syrian children. What happened was Israel has been trying to gain control of Syria inch by inch by drilling for oil using the companies owned by Rothschilds, by Dick Cheney, by Murdochs, and all this time, nobody from the United Nations is confronting the owners of these oil companies, asking them that how can you drill in a region that is disputed? This is against the UN Charter. There's a war going on. There's a war for land. There's a war for control of resources. But as of the last time we checked, Golan Heights and the rest of the Syrian land is still belonging to Syria and not to Israel. So how can a foreign company be allowed to drill for oil in someone else's land without any license being issued to it from the government of that land? This is the question I need to ask the United Nations, that why is the United Nations so biased and so prejudiced that all its guns point at Iran in the United Nations Security Council session? And nobody's talking about what Israel is doing, the role of Israel in sponsoring terrorism in the land of Ghouta. Nobody's talking about the banned factions that are creating a havoc, killing children in this land, being funded and armed by nobody else but Israel. Why isn't anybody talking about it on mainstream media? Why is there such a big cover-up for the war crimes of Israel again? And why is United Nations playing mute, deaf, and dumb to the truth? Well, I do not say that Iran is totally innocent, but you cannot put all the blame on Iran and Russia. Self-defense is everyone's right. When Syria got invaded on the same lines as Libya and Iraq and Afghanistan, the ruler had to retaliate. So Assad retaliated and asked his allies, that is Russia and Iran, to come and help him to prevent the control of his land by the foreign forces. So this was an act of self-defense. What I don't understand is this, that how come the United Nations has not brought this up with United States and with Israel and with the NATO forces or with the coalition forces, that why are you invading Syria? You have no business in Syria. What are you doing in Syria? What are you trying to do in Syria? Why won't the United Nations ask Israel, what was its plane doing in Syria that Iran decided to take down, that actually precipitated the current crisis? If you look back at Netanyahu's recent speech, where he was holding a part of his own airplane found in the airspace of Syria that was taken down by Iran, he was actually challenging Iran that how dare you do that? How dare you take down my plane? The question is, what was an Israeli airplane doing in a prohibited airspace where it shouldn't have been? How come United Nations would not ask Israel about what was its airplane doing in a foreign airspace without permission? How come the United Nations won't ask Israel, how can you drill oil using these notorious warmongers companies without permission, without against the UN Charter? How come the United Nations is not asking the owners of these oil companies that are drilling oil right now in Syria for Israel? How come United Nations is not asking the owners of these oil companies that why are you drilling oil in a foreign land against the permission of the government of that land? That is something totally beyond my comprehension. And that is why I think United Nations is not neutral in making decisions on Syria or Ghouta. United Nations has total partiality, conflict of interest. That is why we cannot see peace over here. What I do recommend right now is that someone has to confront Israel. And here's why I say I do not find Iran totally innocent, because I see Iran standing and screaming at Israel all the time. I see Iran challenging Israel all the time, trying to confront Israel all the time, only verbally. But when it comes to orchestrating a response to Israel, we're only seeing that response lead to the death of Syrian children. None of the Iranian soldiers are dying in this war. None of the Israeli soldiers are dying in this war. In this war, the Syrian children are dying. So this is what I don't understand. That okay, you have problems with Israel. Okay, we understand that. And you're challenging Israel. We understand that. You're upset with how Israel killed so many Palestinian children. We totally understand that. Humanity is with you. The people of the world are with you. They do want peace in Palestine. They do want justice delivered to the children of Gaza who suffered from the brutal massacre committed against them by Israel in 2014. We do understand Iran's perspective on that, but what I don't seem to understand is that why are Syrian children dying as a result of Iran and Israeli conflict? This is what I don't understand. That why are these innocent children in Syria and Ghouta dying from a conflict between Iran and Israel? This is not fair. This is not acceptable. And this is where I feel that Iran has its own explanation to give to the world. And it is not that Iran is all innocent. And the same thing goes for Russia at the same time, that, okay, you have problems with the war crimes committed by US in Iraq and in Afghanistan, the drone strikes and everything, the invasions, totally understandable. I totally understand this. And I'm with you on this because I have been campaigning against these war crimes for years and these illegal invasions for years. But the question is, how come, due to your issues with USA, how come you are not directing your energy and resources towards USA? Instead, you are actually, putting up this bloody massacre, this response. Your response is actually aggravating a massacre that is actually killing not your soldiers, but Syrian kids. This is what I don't understand. This is why I think both the opposite parties of this war have an explanation to give. US, NATO, the Gulf coalition has a bigger explanation to give, because there is now strong evidence coming out of this war that suggests direct funding of terrorism by one side that is leading to the current crisis that we are seeing, the humanitarian crisis leading to 500 people dying, including 150 children, that recently happened in Ghouta. What I don't understand is we Pakistanis, we just got hammered at FATF. We have been put on the gray list for June in the FATF for a question mark, very controversial Mumbai attack in India that some of the Indian officials have claimed that was an inside job. But Pakistan has been blamed for it, for that one attack that we have, there's no proof, and we had no role, our government had no role played in orchestrating that attack. Yet, FATF just hammered us. But here we see United Nations not questioning the silent players of the current humanitarian crisis, the silent players who are silently responsible for killing so many children in Syria. That includes Israel. Israel is working very silently, very quietly, standing in the corner of the room, precipitating all the massacre, precipitating all the bloodshed, just because it wants to drill more oil, just because it wants to advance its territories. And it is doing that by funding terrorist factions, banned outfits, extremism. And these rebels, so-called extremists, are the ones who are creating a havoc and who are actually killing all these children. So why is the United Nations not confronting Israel on this? This is my question to United Nations, that why aren't you being neutral over here? Because we cannot see peace till you're neutral. We will continue to have these kind of wars, because if you continue to cover the dirty laundry of Israel, we will never see peace in the region. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.